Hi, friends. I'm Gio, and Bentley is eating right beside me. So if you hear a couple little noises, well, Bentley's in charge of sound effects. Let's get started with this week's story. Chapter 1. I'm Kai Nakamura. My grandparents migrated from Nagoya, the capital city of Aichi Prefecture in Japan. I have cousins there, but I've only been back once. I was born and raised in the western United States, though I don't live on U.S. soil anymore. My new residence is about to be the research vessel Horizon Star, anchored in the shallow seas off Crete. The seaplane flew over the Aegean Sea, a turquoise sparkling field stretching to the horizon. Crete shone in the distance, sunlit and rugged. Below us, the Horizon Star appeared as a small white dot floating about 3 kilometers off the island's northern coast. As we descended, it grew larger, its details sharpening with each passing second. Built 20 years ago, the ship was still in impeccable shape. Polished hardwood deck, a diving platform at the stern, and a crane lift for the 2 robotic rovers. A couple of divers were already in the water. At 52 meters long, the Horizon Star was a mid-sized research vessel licensed to the Hellenic Institute of Marine Archaeologists, HEMA for short. She carried a crew of 25, a mix of researchers, divers, and the ship's own skeleton crew. Dr. Carl Johansson, the director of the site, had personally requested me. He'd read the article about the discovery of the underwater Aztec city of Altalpetl, and the medallion that proved a 16th century Japanese fleet had reached Mexico decades before Columbus. That was 10 years ago, when I was a grad student. My boyfriend at the time was Jordan. We drifted apart because life pulled us in different directions. Sometimes I checked his Facebook. He'd been all over the world. Professional underwater photographers were in demand. His latest project had been photographing killer whales off the Waikiki coast. There is a picture of Jordan, half wearing a wetsuit, celebrating with the guys. The photos he'd taken were beautiful, an orca pod swimming and frolicking, 2 calves tucked close to their mothers. The swimmers below reminded me of my college days diving off Mexico. I hadn't seen Jordan in 9 years? Would he even remember me if I left a message on his Facebook? The plane descended, its pontoon slapping the waves. White spray fanned out behind us in 20-foot plumes. We coasted to a stop about 15 feet from the ship. A small pontoon boat zipped over and idled beneath the rope ladder. I dropped my pack into it, shoved a couple of crates of supplies down, then jumped aboard. The pilot handed off a satchel to the crewman and took off again. The boat docked at the rear of the Horizon Star, and a deckhand helped me up. "Welcome aboard, Kai," the director said. Shorter than I expected, with striking gray hair and a smile straight from Germany, he offered his hand. "You're the final member of the team." "Thank you," I said. "Your call surprised me." "How was the wreck off the Bahamas?" "You know about that?" I asked. Dr. Johansson nodded. "You are highly recommended, so I did my research." "Who recommended me?" "The leader of the team." He glanced up at the wind monitor, then back at me. "He's also our underwater photographer, Jordan Pierce." My feet stopped moving. Chapter 2. I was bunked with an Australian diver named George Starr. The cabin was narrow, with double-decker bunks, a set of drawers instead of a closet, and a small fold-down desk. It smelled of dirty socks and mildew. The portholes showed nothing but rolling ocean. A large swell rocked the boat. "The divers are below," the director said. "Can you give me any details?" He led me to the main deck and into a room filled with a dozen monitors. Techs sat at half of them, working ROV feeds and keeping constant communication with the divers. We walked over to one with headphones on. "This is Cristobal. He's from Athens. Anything interesting?" Cristobal slid his headphones off. "Whale song. The hydrophone array puts them about 3 kilometers northeast." He tapped the side of the headset. These things pick up everything. Breathing, tank taps, you name it. If comms ever drop, sound still gets through. Dr. Johansson pointed at one of the screens. To put it geographically, Kai, we're more than 3 kilometers off the Heraclean region of Crete and 141 miles from Santorini. The place most people think of as Atlantis, I said. He smiled, the kind of smile that said he'd heard that 100 times. It began as a simple dive to investigate a sunken coastal city. We believe this part of the seabed was once above water, then a cataclysm forced it under. Our working theory is that it sank due to massive seismic activity and tsunamis triggered by the Minoan eruption that destroyed Akrotiri around 1600 BC. It reshaped Crete's coast and is considered a major factor in the fall of the Minoan civilization. Any luck? I asked. Maybe too much. He pointed to a second monitor. I squinted at the murky image. Is that a plane? In addition to the city, he said quietly, we discovered something else. A man in a blue wetsuit, double oxygen tank strapped to his back, floated nearby on the feed, focusing his camera on one of the bent propellers. From the wreckage, we estimate a 17-meter wingspan and a length of 12 or 13 meters. Smith, our expert, believes it to be a British bomber from World War II, a Bristol Blenheim. How did it get here? I asked. Johansson's expression tightened. It fought in one of the fiercest battles of the Mediterranean, he said, the Battle of Crete. I'm not familiar with it. Johansson frowned. May 1941, a 13-day airborne invasion, the first large-scale one in history. More than 20,000 German paratroopers dropped onto the island. Hundreds of aircraft. British, Greek, Australian, New Zealand forces on the ground. Civilians fighting with farm tools. It was a world war in miniature. He paused. Nearly 8,000 dead. A bloodbath, so costly that Hitler swore he'd never attempt another airborne assault again. Who won? The Axis. Afterward, Crete became Fortress Crete for the rest of the war. Cristobal switched on a fan, and the moving air thinned the ozone smell. On the monitor, one of the divers lifted his camera and gave a small salute to another diver. A gesture so familiar it hit me before I could brace for it. Jordan. The wetsuit was new, so was the camera, a custom build, the kind you couldn't buy online. Did he even know I was coming? How long have they been down? I asked. Cristobal checked his monitor. 10 minutes? I turned to Dr. Johansson. Can I go down? Right now? Like my aunt said, if you want to get wet, jump in the water. 10 minutes later, I was zipped into a wetsuit, tanks recharged and strapped to my back. I had my trusty Garmin Phoenix dive computer secured to my wrist. One of the men pointed toward the water. Follow the rope attached to the buoy. It'll take you straight to the site. We're having trouble with comms, so it's old school. What's wrong? Unusually high swells are making it tough to align the acoustic transducer. Storm on the way? I asked. Maybe. You can't tell in Club Med, he said with a smirk. This part of the sea was shallow, maybe 30 meters until it dropped off the Cretan shelf. I stepped to the edge of the diving platform, let the weight settle across my shoulders, and fell backward into the water. The cold closed over me. I found the bright orange rope tied to the buoy and followed it down into the blue-green dark. My gut felt like blue bottle jellyfish were drifting inside me, their stings tightening with every meter I sank. Chapter 3. The walls of a shrine or temple appeared first, emerging from the blue-green dark. It must have stood on a low hill once. The rope led straight to it. A small base camp had been set up just outside the walls, stocked with extra gear they wouldn't have to haul back to the surface. The water here was a deeper blue-green, the sun above reduced to a pale star. 2 divers in black wetsuits were shining their lights across one of the walls. A fragment of fresco clung there, a geometric pattern of foliage, or what was left of it. Tumbled blocks surrounded the temple, angling downhill. Their regularity suggested foundations for homes. I swam toward the divers. They noticed me and came to meet me. "I'm Kai. Jordan around?" One of them pointed toward a second orange rope. "Thanks." This rope led away from the supposed houses, angling into deeper shadow. About 30 meters along, I saw it. A twin-propeller airplane, one propeller missing, the other bent. The remains of the craft were a dark gray shape resting on the pale sea floor. In my mind, I imagined what it looked like nearly a century ago. A compact British warplane with a crew of 3, a turret on top, and a bomb bay underneath. Something slithered away from my light and vanished beneath the fuselage. Probably an eel. They're common around Crete. It wasn't the only creature that called this wreck home. A 90-centimeter dusky grouper peered out from the shattered pilot's compartment. Its golden eyes reflected the glow of my light, fixing on me as if weighing whether I was easy prey, or best ignored. Its gills pulsed in a slow, steady rhythm. But it didn't move. Lights appeared on the far side of the plane. I nodded at the silent guardian and swam toward the right wing, toward the light. An ROV, its lights bright, sliced through the water. Below it, 3 divers hovered in the blue-green murk. One held the camera, focusing it on the wing and its faded markings. I closed the distance. Mid-wing, the roundel was still visible, a dark blue outer ring with a red center. Royal Air Force. This had been a British plane. Noticing my light, the 3 divers looked my way. I swam up to Jordan. He wore a blue wetsuit, just like when we had dove together. I had to smile. Jordan didn't recognize me. It's hard when you're wearing a wetsuit from head to toe. I waved, and my nerves only let me get out one word. "Hi." Jordan looked at me, then at my face, at my eyes, behind his faceplate. He blinked. Chapter 4. Jordan let the camera fall against his chest, and his hand flashed out, gripping my arm. A round dive computer glowed faintly on his wrist. "Kai, you're here?" "I'm the new guy." Jordan nodded. We were 30 meters underwater, hadn't seen each other for nearly a decade, and this was, awkward. The cool water kept me from blushing. "What do you need me to do?" "We need the serial number. Check the side. I'll check the other wing." I followed him over the wrecked plane. From above, the remains of large block letters became visible through the murk. I pointed and swam down. The plane's serial number, or what was left of it, an L, an 8, and a 1, barely appeared through the haze. Jordan took pictures, then pointed from the fading letters to the cockpit. The full number should be engraved in the cockpit. "Somebody sleeping in the bed." I pointed at the dusky grouper, a deep brown fish with odd patches of cream white speckling its bodies. Its markings made it blend into the ruins so well. It was almost part of the wreck. It floated in the cockpit, the size of a full backyard propane barbecue grill, its golden eyes fixed on us. The jaws were enormous, wide enough to swallow a fish the size of a soccer ball. Groupers do have teeth, not like a shark, but tiny, sharp needles meant to grip prey, not to kill it. Normally, they weren't dangerous. This one had claimed the plane as its lair. The turret on top of the plane was crushed open. The corroded mounting that once held the Browning machine gun bent outward, the weapon long gone. I raised a finger, pointing at the turret. Jordan shook his head. I swam toward the turret anyway. The plexiglass canopy had vanished decades ago. The opening was just large enough for me to slip through. Inside, the turret was a dim cave lit only by my beam. A corroded ladder led down into the fuselage. I followed it. Fish skeletons were piled on the floor. An octopus squeezed deeper into a crevice. An old, corroded pipe lay among the bones. I picked it up, swam the short distance to the cockpit, and gave the grouper a single light tap. It startled, flared its fins, and glided out of the wreck. Jordan swam in behind me. His light illuminated the wrecked cockpit. Little more than rust and silt remained. The seats were the only skeletal shapes that had survived the depths. Jordan pointed. A warped plaque hung from the side of the cockpit. I wiped away the grime, revealing the corroded number. L1381. I showed Jordan. He pushed in and photographed it, then panned the camera across the cramped cockpit. Lingering on a control panel were several toggles and buttons still clung to the frame. His light caught a half-buried circle in the silt. I moved closer, stirring a small cloud of sediment. Darker than the silt, it was a disc, about 2 centimeters across, with a small hole punched at one end. Something was inscribed on it. I picked it up. Jordan handed me a plastic evidence bag, and I slipped the small medallion inside. On a whim, I sifted my hands through the grime. A second disc surfaced. I added it to the bag. A quick search yielded a knob from a controller. Jordan's dive computer lit and began blinking. Time was up. He pointed toward the surface, 30 meters above. We swam out of the cockpit and began our ascent. At this depth, it would take us nearly 10 minutes to rise safely, avoiding nitrogen trouble, the bends. We floated upward together, communicating in the quiet way divers do, glances, small shifts of expression, the brush of a hand. 9 years since I'd last seen him, and here we were, rising through blue-green silence. I wanted to reach for his hand as we ascended, but I wasn't sure if that crossed a line. Halfway up, the hull of the horizon star appeared above us. A pale, elongated triangle that slowly gained shape and dimension as we closed the distance. Our final rest stop was a few meters below the boat. We surfaced at last and took our face masks off. Several of the crew helped us onto the rear diving platform and unstrapped our tanks. As we stood, Jordan pulled me into a hug and said, "We need your help." Chapter 4. 6 of us crowded into the small conference room. Really just the mess hall with pretensions. A microwave hummed as it spun a burrito round and round. The coffee maker dripped steadily, and the fridge added its low mechanical throb. A 2-burner stove sat beside a stainless steel sink overflowing with dishes. Dr. Johansson leaned against the counter, waiting for the pot to finish. Utilitarian gray carpet, stark white walls, 3 tables bolted to the floor. A Greek newspaper lay abandoned on one of them, its bold headlines and colorful picture of a street in Athens contrasting with the drabness of the room. The air smelled of fried eggs and ozone. Through the porthole, the sky was crystal blue, but I could feel a storm gathering somewhere beyond the horizon. Mediterranean storms like to arrive, uninvited. I sat beside Jordan at the nearest table, our shoulders almost touching. He wore a white tank with a blue stripe across the chest, and black shorts. The light hair on his tanned legs reminded me of years ago, when we had been a couple, back when we were grad students diving off the Mexican coast. Across from us, 2 other divers sipped coffee, while Cristobal hunched over a laptop. He tapped a key, and an overhead map flickered onto the 55-inch flat screen. The north coast of Crete, our vessel's position, the ruins we'd been floating above, and a small dot marking the wreck of the Bristol Blenheim. Cristobal spoke first. "These images are the most current satellite feeds available." I leaned forward, looking at the map. "It looks pretty straightforward. Why the secrecy?" Jordan took my hand. This is confidential, not to be released until the British government gives the go-ahead. Dr. Johansen filled his coffee cup, the dark brew steaming. He drank it black and hot. First, you are replacing Melissa Santino, who, unfortunately for our schedule, announced she was pregnant. First trimester. Jordan recommended you as an alternate. Welcome aboard, Kai. I nodded at everyone. Thank you. It's good to be here. But what exactly is here? Good question, Dr. Johansen said, taking a seat at another table. The serial number you retrieved confirmed what we suspected. During the war, intelligence couriers flew from Egypt to Crete. We don't know the full chain of custody, but we have reason to believe Blenheim L1381 was carrying an encrypted message, possibly intended for HMS Illustrious, which was active during the Battle of Crete. Excuse me, I said. What are the odds that a message would survive? It's been underwater since 1941. Paper doesn't last. The plane barely did. I doubt it'll survive another decade. Cristobal finally looked up from the laptop. Messages back then weren't loose sheets, he said, stretching his hands above him. They were carried in Bakelite dispatch tubes, non-metallic, watertight, purpose-built for exactly this kind of thing. The image on the monitor shifted. A dull brown cylinder appeared, about 15 centimeters long and maybe 3 wide. Smooth sides, flat ends. The upper cap showed coarse threads and a dark rubber gasket. They're small enough for a pilot to keep in his vest, Dr. Johansen said, pointing at the screen, and tough enough to survive a ditching. Before you ask, metal detectors won't help much. Bakelite doesn't register, and the only metal is a tiny sealing ring. Unless the contents have metal, the signal is barely a blip. Jordan squeezed my hand. It's like looking for a chopstick in a haystack. Kai, you found a possible clue, Dr. Johansen said, setting a small plastic case on the table. Inside were the 2 small dark circles I had found. Do you know what these are? No, sir. British World War II identity discs, he said. Cristobal frowned. They don't look like dog tags. British military used circles, Americans used ovals, Dr. Johansen replied, as if everyone should know this. In 1941, they were still using compressed fiber, not metal. Decades underwater would darken them and harden the material. If these belonged to the person carrying the tube, then we're close. I drummed my fingers on the table, memorizing every detail of the Bakelite tube. Assuming it did survive, what's so important about the contents? Dr. Johansen let his gaze travel around the room before answering. We don't know. It could be troop movements, intelligence on Axis fleet positions, or even something involving Enigma. What's that? I asked. The Germans used a machine called Enigma, a kind of mechanical encoder. He lifted his hands, framing an invisible box about the size of a typewriter. Every time you pressed a key, the machine rewired the alphabet, so the letter A might become Q one moment and F the next. Without the exact daily settings, the message was gibberish. And that's important now. Why? I asked. It's still considered top secret, Jordan said. A surprising amount from that war is. We don't know why this one is still locked down, but it is. If we find it, what then? We turn it over to the British government, Dr. Johansen replied. Their specialists will open it and preserve whatever's inside. Chapter 5. Jordan led me to his bunk, which was just down the center hall from the one I was assigned. He shared it with one of the other divers, Avery Townsend. For the first time since I had arrived, we were alone. Your team leader? I asked, casually sitting in the one chair in the room. Far cry from Mexico, he said, sitting on his bunk. He had the lower one. Just like I remembered, he kept it in pristine shape with tight corners and a fluffed pillow. Underneath were drawers, where I assumed he kept his gear stowed. It's been a long time, I said, resorting to the cliché because I really couldn't think of anything else to say. I had forgotten the thrill of seeing Jordan every morning, but my body hadn't. 9 years, 3 months, Jordan said, patting the bunk beside him. I had co-pilot do the math. It's really good to see you again. I saw that National Geographic spread, the one about the cenote treasure. Mostly luck and a great team, I said, taking the seat next to him. Our legs brushed. You've always been modest, he said. I was on the other side of the world, I said, taking his calloused hand in mine. You could have called anyone. His hand slipped from mine and rose to cradle my cheek. His voice dropped into that low, sultry rasp that always found its way straight to my soul. I needed a specialist who knows how to find things in the dark. I hadn't planned on touching him, on caressing his cheek, on letting our fingers intertwine. But his breath quickened and held. I slid my hands under the white tank and lifted it over his head. A new scar crossed just under his left collarbone. I could ask him about it, or let my hands answer first. I kissed it, his skin warm and tasting of salt. I'd have to ask him about the scar, but later, in an hour or two. That was the breath where restraint stopped pretending. The years melted between us, though it seemed so long since I had last seen him. His lips felt just as I remembered, warm, comfortable, a man I could relax with, be myself with. A soft rumble went through his chest, and he whispered, I missed you. His lips nuzzled my chin, and something in me surrendered. Chapter 6. We were positioned at the base camp in the temple ruins, guiding a sled down with a piece of equipment that had arrived with me, a new dredge hose. Supposedly, it could move silt better than the older model. In my experience, they all worked about the same. The ROV hovered above us, its high-intensity lamps cutting through the murk. A tether ran back to the horizon star, carrying video and power. All 5 divers, Jordan, me, Avery, George, and Mila, had descended. Dr. Johansson stayed topside with Cristobal. Still, a second hose could be useful. Before we dove, Jordan had mapped out a grid with the plane at the center. We'd work in 2 locations so we wouldn't get in each other's way. George and I would clear the interior. Jordan, Avery, and Mila would start at the nose and work around the cockpit. Testing, testing. All you cowboys give me a howdy if you can hear me, Cristobal said. We all responded. Acoustic transducer is working 5 by 5, but I don't know how long it'll hold. Rough seas heading our way. Also, we've got incoming. Should arrive by the time you see daylight. Who is it? Jordan asked. Boss has zipped lips. The dusky grouper had reclaimed the cockpit, its golden eyes watching as we entered its realm. George and I carried 1 dredge hose. Mila and Avery handled the other. Jordan brought the rest of the gear. Overhead, the drone shadowed us. The grouper retreated deeper into the Blenheim. We set up the equipment, checked our remaining bottom time, and I slipped through the ruptured turret to scare the grouper out. Once it fled, George and I swam inside. The shadows felt darker. With 2 of us in the fuselage, the space seemed narrower. I settled into the silt near the bomb bay, sifting through the muck. What had those last minutes been like before the crash? Bullet holes riddled the left side. The lights from the others cast odd polka-dot shadows. It would have been amusing if it weren't the inside of a World War II wreck. My fingers closed around a buckle. Parachute harness? Uniform? Hard to tell. George managed to angle the dredge tube through the broken cockpit window. Mila held the rear end outside while he sorted through the debris on the floor. I found a second buckle, then a third. several corroded shells. A bomb rack had slipped from the wall and lay covered in fish skeletons and inches of muck. I wiped it clean. It had 4 slots. 3 were empty. The bottom cradle held a cylinder about 122 centimeters long and 25 centimeters across. A 250-pound bomb. I froze. Chapter 7. The metal casing was corroded. Something crusted around the fins. My light wavered. Something slithered out of sight just beyond the beam. I ignored it. Except for the soft whir of my oxygen. There was nothing. No ticking, no hum. Only George was inside with me. Instinctively, I raised my fist, the diver's signal for danger. He caught the motion and went still. I swallowed and spoke clearly into the calm. All divers, clear the location, drop any equipment and swim to a safe distance. We have ordnance. Kai, repeat, Jordan yelled, his voice rising. I eased toward the cockpit, keeping my eyes on the bomb. George's light swept past me, illuminating the tail fins. Ordnance confirmed, team, he said. Cease all activities and get to a safe distance. Somebody swore. A burst of static hit the comms. Then Cristobal said, trying to reach Dr. Johansson. Did anyone get pictures? Negative, I said. Kai's right, George added, his breath loud in the line. It's a British 250-pound general-purpose bomb. Standard load on a Blenheim. And you're an expert now? Mila said, her voice tight. Did my homework, George muttered, already turning and swimming out of the cockpit. I followed. We left everything behind and regrouped about 10 meters away. The ROV rose and drifted over the wreck. As if sensing an opening, the grouper darted from the shadows and reclaimed the cockpit. The ROV's lights flooded through the turret. Can't see it, Cristobal said. Where exactly was it? Just behind the bomb bay doors. Jordan exhaled sharply. The plane's off limits. My computer says we've got 45 minutes. Let's focus on the ruins while the powers above sort this out. This is Dr. Johansson, a new voice cut in. I'm up to date. Jordan, give me a clean sweep of the site, then get your team topside. Chapter 8. Once again, we gathered in the impromptu conference room. This time, a man sweating in a suit and tie had joined us. Middle-aged, glasses, he looked more like an accountant than an archaeologist. This is Dr. Smith, Dr. Johansson said, directing our attention to the newcomer. Our liaison with the British Museum and our point of contact with the Ephorate of Underwater Antiquities. With the discovery of a British aircraft in Greek territorial waters, the situation has become diplomatically sensitive. Dr. Smith cleared his throat. Complicated and now considerably more urgent with the discovery of the bomb. What do we do? George asked. We've contacted the Hellenic Navy, Dr. Johansson replied. They want us to drop a buoy and leave the immediate area, but not far. They'll need us in an advisory capacity. A frigate is en route and should arrive within 48 hours. Jordan piped up. We should use the time to restock supplies. I agree, Dr. Johansson said. The harbor is about 10 kilometers away. Sounds like a weekend in Crete, Mila said. Jordan flashed me a smile. Since we have 2 days, love. Let me show you Heraklion. Chapter 9. Heraklion is the capital city of Crete. Though the area was inhabited more than 3,000 years ago, it didn't develop into a true city until around the 5th century CE. Known by many names through the millennia, it's best known today for its harbors, its fortifications, and its nightlife. Cafes and nightclubs spill out onto nearly every corner and street. Jordan led me along the main road rising from the harbor, once a Roman port, now crowded with yachts, schooners, and dinghies. The water was an impossible blue, broken by white sails. Above us, the sky stretched deep and bright, with great pillows of clouds drifting lazily across it. The streets were old, cobblestone. I ran my fingers along a stone facade. The surface was warm, smoothed by centuries, yet the shops behind it were new. Stalls overflowed with oranges, apples, and fruits I didn't recognize. We wandered through a fish market, the air thick with salt and brine. Fish glistened on beds of ice, caught only hours earlier. Octopus and cuttlefish lay coiled beside trays of squids and eels. A tank burbled quietly in the corner, crowded with live lobsters. Men in flowing linen shirts open at the neck and wearing slim-fit chinos. Women in linen dresses or blouses. Children running and playing underfoot. A lazy cat stared down at us from a balcony. And one thing nearly everyone wore: cross-body bags. Men, women, and even some children. A few women in headscarves passed by. Families from Egypt or Syria who had made Crete their home. But most people wore the light, sun-bleached fabrics of the island. And the smells: honey and fried lamb, oregano and yeasted bread. It was loud, people calling out in Greek, Italian, even English, bartering over prices, laughing, living, arguing. Sprightly Greek music played from a radio. The sun drenched the stones, the people lending its energy to the soul of the city. Jordan bought a fresh loaf of bread, and we snacked on it as we wandered the stalls. I'd never seen so many sandals in my life. All sizes, men's, women's, children's, stall after stall. We paused and tried some on, buying a pair or two. We dined in a cafe on fresh red mullet grilled over an open flame and seasoned with lemon and oregano. We shared lagana, a sesame-covered flatbread, with a bottle of white wine. That night, we found a small hotel and remembered what we had meant to each other. Chapter 10. Once again, we were crammed into the galley aboard the Horizon Star. The Hellenic Navy frigate sat 100 meters off our bow, anchored like a steel sentinel a kilometer from the original dive site. According to George, it was a Hydra-class frigate, the workhorse of the Hellenic Navy. At 113 meters long, it was more than twice the length of the Horizon Star, with a crew of roughly 190. A small boat had ferried over a handful of sailors along with their equipment. The conference room felt even smaller than usual. Along with our full dive team, we now had an officer in a crisp navy blue Hellenic uniform, Lieutenant Papadopoulos, and 3 members of the underwater demolition unit, all in olive drab, squeezed in with us. Their presence alone made the air feel heavier. The lieutenant wore an unfamiliar cologne and a large mustache. The room smelled of microwave popcorn and too many bodies. Only Cristobal wasn't with us in person. He was present in spirit. A laptop displayed the ROV's last approach toward the wrecked plane. For the last 2 hours, we'd gone over every detail of the Blenheim. Jordan's videos and stills had been dissected down to the pixel. The ROV feed hovered on a monitor, showing the bomber's ruptured fuselage and the familiar silhouette of the dusky grouper, now back in the cockpit and blissfully unaware of the danger behind it. No matter the angle, no matter how close the ROV crept, we still couldn't get a clean line of sight on the bomb. "We don't doubt what you saw," Lieutenant Papadopoulos said, "but we need more information before we proceed." "One 250-pound general-purpose bomb," George muttered, his tone edging into sarcasm. "Seems pretty clear." Dr. Johansson fixed him with a scowl. "We're all tired. Keep it respectful." "Sorry, sir. No offense meant." Dr. Smith raised his hand. "Will this damage the ruins or the bakelite message tube?" Lieutenant Papadopoulos let the question hang for a moment, scanning the room before answering. "Those are secondary concerns. The primary focus is removing the bomb." Jordan and the lieutenant had sketched out a plan. The safest option, they agreed, was a controlled micro-detonation, small enough to neutralize the bomb without risking the entire wreck. "We'll place a small amount of plastic explosive on the casing," one of the Hellenic divers said. "It will crack the casing, allow water in, and render it useless. How do you Americans say? piece of chocolate cake with cherry on top. A small team would descend first, and the Navy divers would evaluate the situation on site. As leaders of the divers, Jordan would go. I refused to let him go alone. I'm not alone. The Navy will be with me. I don't like it. He smiled and patted my cheek. I'll make it up to you when we're back on deck. I caught his wrist before he could pull away. That's not what I meant. I know. His voice softened, just enough that only I could hear it over the hum of the generators and the low murmur of the Navy divers conferring in Greek. But this is the job. Lieutenant Papadopoulos cleared his throat, a polite reminder that the room and the decision belonged to him now. Jordan straightened, the moment between us snapping back into professionalism. The team will descend in 15 minutes, the lieutenant said. We'll brief again on deck. The Navy divers rose in unison, their movements crisp and practiced. Their olive-drab fatigues brushed past me as they filed out, leaving the faint scent of neoprene and machine oil in their wake. Jordan gave me one last look. Steady, reassuring, infuriatingly calm, before following them. And just like that, the galley felt even smaller. Chapter 11. We clustered behind Cristobal, who wore an industrial-sized headset and worked a controller that reminded me of a PS5. His monitor showed an aerial view of Jordan and the divers. They had descended 30 minutes ago. Plenty of time to reach the depths, plenty of time to swim to the wreck, plenty of time for my stomach to churn. Jordan was heading straight toward an unstable World War II bomb. The seas were calm. The acoustic transducer was working. We had comms. We could hear them. My knuckles turned white, clutching the back of Cristobal's chair. I forced my hands to relax. Mostly technical chatter came through the comms, charge size, timer settings, and a few World Cup jokes. Then Jordan guided them to the Blenheim. Jordan, in his blue wetsuit, had his camera out and was taking pictures. The 3 military divers were black. Lieutenant Papadopoulos had remained on board. The dusky grouper surveyed the invaders in its territory and flashed out of the cockpit and into the darkness, its eyes reflecting the divers' lights. I held my breath. The fan moved the air across the room, its whir the only noise. Lieutenant Papadopoulos had gone outside, acting like this was routine. Maybe it was, for him, but not for the rest of us. Dr. Smith was on the satellite phone arguing with someone. He'll be okay, George murmured. I wasn't sure if he was speaking to me or to himself. The 3 divers played rock, paper, scissors. One of them checked his dive computer and mumbled something in Greek. A second diver peeked into the cockpit, just far enough to shine his light inside. They spoke quietly in Greek. A diver took some gear out of his bag and began shaping a small lump. I assumed it was the explosive. Another man attached something to it, and the third, the one who'd lost the game, swam it into the bomb bay. He emerged a moment later and gave a thumbs up. All 4 men swam about 30 meters out. They shrank as the ROV gained altitude. Golden eyes flashed once in the darkness. Over the comms, I heard, Tria, Theo, Ena. Then, through the monitor, we heard a tiny explosion, immediately followed by a much larger one, a thunder that came from the sea. The water above the wreck boiled upward, belching a column of gas and spray. That came from outside the boat, George yelled. Cristobal screamed, ripped his headphones off, and hurled them across the room before slamming his hands over his ears. His monitor dissolved into static. Dr. Smith looked up from his phone, eyes wide. What just happened? Mila snatched up the headphones and shouted, Jordan, respond, anyone! George leaned over the second monitor. Acoustic transducer just went red. Systems dead. ROVs offline too. Why? I yelled. He shook his head. No idea. Maybe the frigate still has comms? Lieutenant Papadopoulos called back. Negative. They've lost contact as well. Dr. Smith's voice cut through the room. What happened? Fuel in the tanks? Mila set the headset down, her hands trembling. They would have rusted out decades ago, George said. Papadopoulos scowled. Simplest answer? That wasn't the only bomb. The explosion triggered a secondary detonation, maybe more, depending on how many were left. George let out a low whistle. A Blenheim could carry 4 250-pounders. Dr. Smith's tone dropped. You ever see the cliffs of Normandy? Craters 10 feet deep? That's a 250-pound bomb. My stomach flipped. I bolted for my wetsuit. I'm suiting up. Find me some tanks. I'll work on the acoustics, Christabel shouted, one hand clamped over his left ear. 5 minutes later, I was in the water, George and Mila right behind me. We all grabbed sleds to speed the descent. Chapter 13. The cool water was clear near the surface, but the deeper we dove, the cloudier it became. Around 10 meters down, the light began to reflect back in shades of brown. By 20 meters, George said, "Brown out, not good. Comms to the surface are still out." Mila inhaled sharply. "Dust storm's getting worse. Could be minutes or hours before it clears. Should we tether?" I swept my lights in every direction. "Jordan, can you hear me?" "If he's in there," George said, his voice tight, "he won't hear you. In this silt, diver-to-diver comms only work at a few meters." "Basically line of sight," Mila muttered. "I hate these." Only the soft hum of my regulator filled my mask. Nothing came over the comms. We dropped to the full 30 meters and found the ruined temple. The water that had looked like dark turquoise an hour ago was now the color of mud. The orange rope from the buoy was barely visible. Our lights barely cut through the murk, but they were enough to catch the second orange rope, the one leading to the Blenheim. What mattered were the comms. Still silent. If we got close enough, maybe they could hear us. "Jordan, hang on. Please respond." My grip on the sled tightened until my knuckles ached inside the gloves. George tried to say something, but the comms cut in and out. I only caught every other word. Instead, he tapped my shoulder and pointed to a deeper shadow on the ground. We swam toward it. The ROV, it lay there. Lights out, sensors motionless. Its cable to the surface snapped. Mila ran a hand over the chassis, checked the brake, and her voice came through the comms. Thin, broken. "It's dead." We continued following the rope. Something crackled into the comms, a voice speaking Greek. I checked right. Mila checked left. She yelled, "Here!" One of the Greek divers, dazed, Mila brought him to the rope and made him grip it. "Have you seen anyone else?" "Oh, he said. Greek for no." One down, 3 to go. The murk grew thicker, like swimming in brown soup. Visibility had dropped to a meter. The rope was the only connection to the world. My stomach tightened. I swallowed. In murk this thick, calm rage would only be a meter. I couldn't tell up from down. How was I supposed to find Jordan? We reached the end of the rope. The dust was so thick I could almost taste it. Normally, the Blenheim would be in view, the group were peering out of the cockpit. Now, nothing. Our lights struggled to cut the gloom. I let go of the rope and swam forward. The Blenheim should be here, its corroded fuselage big enough to bump into. I glanced down. No ground. A pit, a deep one. My light couldn't find the bottom. The Blenheim was gone. The horror made me laugh, not a happy laugh, more the kind that slips out when your world is about to collapse. The grouper would have to find a new home. I called into the void, but with the limited range of the comms it was hopeless. I yelled anyway, "Jordan, I love you, answer me!" Chapter 14. I focused on the comms, closing my eyes to listen. George said something, but the words fractured into static. A faint push of water brushed my shoulder. The current, anything unconscious would drift with it. If Jordan wasn't moving, maybe he was somewhere downstream of the flow. Maybe if I followed it, I'd get close enough for his comm to break through the silt. I took my bearings, felt the direction of the pole. and swam that way, slow, controlled, barely disturbing the cloud around me. George and Mila's lights faded behind me until they were swallowed by the brownout. This was a stupid idea, but it was the only idea I had. I stopped again, listened. Jordan, can anyone hear me? Please respond. Nothing. Then a glow bloomed above me, brighter, wider, steadier than our handheld. The second ROV. They must have dropped it the moment the first one went dark. Its beam cut through the murk in a narrow cone, searching. I tried calling again. No response. The murk was too thick. A burst of static, and a faint voice. Not Jordan's. Regular to your flow, and then more static. Was that the Horizon Star? Had they gotten the acoustic transducer working? This is Kai. Please respond. Another burst of static came through, but no words. The ROV lights shut off for half a second, then came back on, like a blink. I froze. That wasn't a malfunction. ROVs had hydrophones. Dust storms didn't affect sound the way they killed comms. If the ship heard something, breathing, tapping, anything, they couldn't send it back through the comm system. But they could send it through the ROV, not with words, with light. They had heard something. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. It didn't mean it was Jordan, but it was a start. I steered the sled up to the ROV and flicked my light off for a second to show I'd gotten their message. This close, they could see me. Ironic. We can stream movies from the middle of the ocean, but down here, we're blinking flashlights like shipwreck survivors. The ROV whirred and swiveled, drifting in a direction that made no sense to me. I followed. For 2 minutes, all looked the same. Mud-clouded water that limited sight to about a meter. Then static broke into the comm. Hang on the... And then only the rasp of my respirator. The ROV blinked a second time and stopped. Below us, the murk lightened slightly. A suit light? The gloom thinned. Shapes formed, barely shadows, but humanoid. I sank and found 2 divers, one in a blue wetsuit, the other in black. The black suit didn't move. Debris from the wing pinned him to the ground. I froze. Relief hit me so hard it almost knocked the breath from my regulator. Jordan was alive. You owe me a beer, I yelled, hoping the emotion didn't break into the comm. Jordan looked at me, his exhausted face smiling. I know a bar just off the dock. Chapter 15. Mila and George had found the other diver, and as a group, we ascended out of the sandstorm. The ascent took us 8 minutes, and a team of Navy divers met us on the way. Except for bumps and bruises, no one was seriously injured. The next day, the silt had settled. The water was clear. Jordan and I dove back to the Blenheim. It wasn't there, only a 4-meter wide hole, 3 meters deep. The grouper was back, its golden eyes staring at us from the crater. It survived the explosion. You look sad, Jordan said to me. That plane was a piece of history, I said. I think I'm going to miss it. Jordan bent down and cleared a small area. Would you like a souvenir? I drifted over. Jordan picked up a dark brown cylinder partially encrusted with grime. Is that the message tube? I asked, incredulously. Looks like it. I wrapped my arms around him. What say we celebrate tonight at that bar you mentioned? You know, the one by the harbor. You, me, alone. We could visit that hotel again. Tell Dr. Johansson we're getting over the bends and spend all day tomorrow in bed. The comm clicked. You do know that comms are working again, right? Cristobal chimed in. And Dr. Johansson heard everything. Thank you, my friends, for joining me and Bentley for our story. If these characters seem slightly familiar, they were used in in a story called The Deep that came out about a year ago. When I was coming up with this story, I checked the algorithm. I call it algae, just because. Anyway, I checked with algae and to see what kind of recommendations it had. And it suggested an underwater story, because I've done a couple of those before. And I like the idea. And it also suggested two old lovers reunite. So I kind of thought, why not? And that's where this story started. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Oh, there goes Bentley. He's kind of active tonight. Peace, my friends. I'll see you next week. I love you all.